Oh, g'day guys. I broke my leg. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I do quite a lot of solo trips and often into very, very remote locations. Luckily, I was not in a remote location when this happened. I was in fact at home, and they say that 90% of accidents happen in the home, and I stuck to that rule hard and fast. So it's quite a boring story. I was basically walking from the car to the garage to get something, and my partner beeped the horn to let me know that she's found what I was going to get, and I suddenly turned around in the driveway, but my foot didn't turn around. I've completely ruptured a ligament and tore another ligament, and my foot was just left dangling like a limp piece of lettuce. So anyway, I need to wear this moon boot here for who knows how long, and then physio to get back to normal. But that got me thinking, what happens if I sprain an ankle or break a leg or some other catastrophic thing happens while I'm out on a solo trip or even on a trip with some friends? What do I do? How do I stay safe? And how do I cope if something does happen to me? So this video is just some thoughts on the topic. Right, so as I said in the intro, I've done a lot of solo trips all around the country, often to very, very remote places. Now, luckily, I've escaped unharmed, but I have had quite a lot of close calls. For example, 6 years ago, I was doing a trip to Lake Eyre. Now, Lake Eyre is a huge salt lake in the middle of South Australia. It is pretty remote. It's in the middle of a giant remote desert area, so it's very, very arid. There's no towns for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. And on this particular day, I had left the smallest town, which is only a single pub with only 2 permanent residents, William Creek. I had just left there and I drove out to Lake Eyre. I hadn't seen a single car the entire day, so I was pretty far from help. Now, when I got to Lake Eyre, I got out of the car, it was 45 degrees. This was the middle of summer in December. And I thought, I'm going to walk out on the salt crust of the lake. And I had this crazy idea of taking some camera equipment and flying my drone all the way around me to get a really cool looking shot. So I got my backpack full of camera gear, I had a bottle of water, I had my hat, and I had a tripod strapped to my backpack, and I started walking out on the salt flat. This is quite an amazing place. The layer of crust on which I'm walking is only a millimetre or two thick, and every footstep I take is sinking down into the mud. There's a few times when I've actually sunk down a fair bit, and underneath the crust is this bottomless black ooze. Now, I got a couple of 100 metres out when suddenly I heard a sudden crack and both of my feet fell knee deep through the salt into the black ooze and sludge underneath the salt surface. And I must admit, I panicked for a brief second, but luckily I stopped. I didn't take a single step forward, And what happened was all this ooze that's under the salt is really, really thick, and it developed a suction effect on my legs, and it was really, really hard to move or even to pull them out. So I ended up falling backwards onto my ass and trying to push myself out of the sludge, and I managed to do that, luckily. And I got myself out of the sludge and back to the shore. Now, this could have ended in tragedy. This could have happened, had a much worse ending. I could have made it 500, 600 meters in, where it's a lot deeper. I could have fallen in waist deep and not been able to get myself out of there. Now, being such a remote location, it's extremely dry, extremely arid. The entire landscape is salt. It dehydrates you super quickly. 45-degree sun shining down. I've only had a small bottle of water with me, and the chances of another vehicle coming out that way that day, let alone the next day or the next day, were very slim. Just standing out on the surface of Lake Eyre for about an hour. I am so thirsty. I've been drinking water, but no amount of water can quench my thirst. I just feel so dehydrated and so full of salt. Luckily I have plenty of water, but so I was very, very lucky to get out of there without any issues. So I've had my fair share of close calls. I remember a long time ago, and I won't go into too much detail on this story, but me and a friend of mine, we were walking through some old ruined buildings, and the floor of the building, the floor of this room was all ruined, and you can see the exposed floor beams. And I was stepping on the floor beams, going from one beam to the next, and as I stepped forward, I felt something puncture the bottom of my sand shoe and go straight into my foot. And I was already mid-step, so I had no choice but to keep on going. And as I took a step forward with my other foot, the same thing happened. I stepped into another rusty nail. So I had puncture marks in my shoes and in the soles of my feet. Rusty nails, big long rusty nails, had gone through both feet. I was 18, I think, at the time, and at the end of that, I didn't take my shoes off. We finished what we were there to do. We went back home, and then when I took my shoes off, it's only then that I realised that they had punctured my feet. Luckily, I didn't get tetanus. Luckily, I didn't get any kind of infection, but that too could have ended a lot worse. So how do you keep yourself safe when you're doing a solo trip in the bush, or even if you're with a group of friends? Now, the number one thing that I would say is don't rush. Take your time. Look around you. Always think about what ifs. What if I go for this bushwalk and it ends up being a 4-hour bushwalk? Or what if I get lost? What if something happens as I drive along this dirt track for 2 days with no communications? So you always need to think ahead and think through the risks that could happen. And if you're rushing, most accidents happen because you're rushing, you're not paying enough attention. That goes the same for car accidents, it's the same for accidents while you're walking or using a knife. If you're rushing and not paying attention, that's when accidents happen. So slow down, take your time, don't rush, be thoughtful. So a lot of these suggestions are common sense, but not everybody thinks of all these things all the time. For example, when you're traveling through the outback, make sure that somebody else knows where you are, the rough route, and where you are going to be. Now, I myself am an adventurous traveller. I like to not plan much ahead. I just know I'm going to be in South Australia for 2 weeks, but I don't have a clear plan, or I might have a rough idea. But what you should do is, when you're in a town and you go, okay, I know that I'm going to take this track, I'm not going to have communications for 2 days. So send a text or phone call somebody back home and say, this is the town I'm in, this is the town I'm going to plan to be in 2 days' time. If you don't hear from me in 2 days, then, send out a distress call. So that's something that I would highly recommend everybody do. Just let somebody else know your movements, and when you get back into mobile phone coverage range, then you can plan ahead and phone up and say, hey, here I am, and now I'm going to go bush again, and I'll be somewhere else in 2 or 3 days' time. But it's a really good idea to let people know of your movements. Another thing you can do is carry a satellite phone. Now, not everybody can afford to have a satellite phone, but if you have one, or if you can afford to run a satellite phone, it's a fantastic idea to have one on board, because that way you've got communications, you can throw it in your backpack, and you can call somebody if anything happens. If you can't afford a sat phone, I highly recommend an EPIRB. Now, an EPIRB is an electronic position indicating radio beacon. It's a small box with a battery and a button on there, and it sends out a GPS distress signal via satellite. And you have to register it with the federal authorities in every country, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world if you're in distress, and if it has to be a life or death situation. If you set one of these off and it's not a life or death situation, then you get a fine. But if it's life or death, hit the button and they will come and find you, usually within hours or a day. So that's the very start of being able to communicate with the outside world. If you're going on a bushwalk and you're going with a group of people, then I highly recommend take a little pocket CB radio. In fact, every member of your group should have a pocket CB radio, and leave them on. Get on the same channel, make sure the batteries are fresh, and leave them on, because if you get separated, these little CB radios have a range of many kilometers. So if you get separated, you can radio each other and backtrack and try and go towards a known landmark and meet up again. In one of my trips, I was at Kings Canyon, and there's a lookout a little bit further north of Kings Canyon. And I was reading in the paper, just weeks after I had been there, that a couple had been for a bushwalk on the same track that I'd been on. And as they were returning to their car, they got separated. One of them made it back to their car, which was only a couple of 100 meters further down the track. The other one took a wrong turn, and they found them hours later, perished from heat exhaustion, because it was a really hot day. They had no water, they had no communications. So to avoid those sorts of situations, if they would have had an EPIRB and a pair of CB radios, then they could have remained in contact with each other. Now, the other thing about walking or going hiking in groups is, I think the same rules should apply in hiking situations as in convoy driving situations. So when you're in a convoy of four-wheel drives, then you're driving in single file down a track, and it's always a responsibility. It's always your responsibility to look after the guy behind you. So that means when you get to a fork in the road or a turn, you need to wait and make sure that they know which way you're going. So if you're going for a group bushwalk and you're going single file, first of all, stick together. But if you must spread out a little bit and you get to a fork in the road, or even something that looks like it might be mistaken for another track, stop, wait for everybody to arrive, and then head off together. The other thing about going for bushwalks, whether you're in a group or solo, is I think each person should have a small backpack with water, a hat, a light jacket, depending on the climate. It could be a warm jacket if you're going in cool conditions. You need to have a first aid kit, a snakebite kit if you're in Australia. And you also need to know how to use your snakebite kit and first aid kit. Do a first aid course, make sure you know how to use it, because it's not much good if you don't know how to use it and you're by yourself. So you need to know how to use your first aid kit. But this backpack should have everything that you need to keep yourself alive for a day or two. So just imagine if you get separated from your group, or if you're by yourself and you fall down somewhere in between some rocks and you break your leg, then first of all you need to know how to treat that broken leg, make a splint, bandage it up, etc. But you need to have everything with you to keep yourself sheltered, dry, water and food. Food is probably the least of your worries, but you can't survive long without water, and if you have blood loss, then you need to know how to patch yourself up. So you need first aid kit, very important. If you have, on the subject of first aid kits, if you have any kind of medical condition where you need to take daily medication like heart medication, make sure that that is in your first aid kit that you take with you when you're going for a bushwalk, or if you're driving along in the outback, make sure you have that with you in a bag that you can take. So that way, if you do get separated from everybody else or you break a leg, then at least you've got your vital medication with you. I also recommend taking a life straw. So a life straw is basically a carbon-filled straw. Sometimes they're in water bottles, sometimes the straw is just a separate tube. You can stick it in a puddle and suck up water and it'll filter everything out of it. It could be a lifesaver. Water purifying tablets, another thing you can take. A little collapsible water container so that you can scoop up some water from a river and then filter it through your life straw. These are all vital things to take with you. What else? A compass. If you know how to use a compass and get your bearings with a compass and a map, that could also be another thing to take with you. But I'm really just talking about the bare essentials to keep yourself safe and warm and alive for a day or maximum 2 days. If you have an EPIRB, definitely take it with you. The other way to increase your safety is to increase your knowledge about the area that you're going to visit. For example, if you're going to Fraser Island, then know about the dangers of dingoes. Now, when I went to Fraser Island several years ago, the dingoes were okay. People were told don't feed them and they'll be okay. But increasingly, the dingoes have become a lot more aggressive over the years, and now they are a menace and they actively go out and attack people and drive them into the water so that they can hopefully drown them and eat them or do whatever they want. But the dingoes are now very, very aggressive on Fraser Island. So do some research, find out what the dangers are in the area you're about to visit. Dingoes, crocodiles up in the tropical areas are dangerous plants. There's stinging nettles. In Australia there's a plant called the Gimpy plant, which is the world's most toxic plant. It has these little neurotoxins that get into your skin and they sting like nothing else. And there's a rumor that some guy fell into a Gimpy plant. He fell backwards into one, and 40 years later he still has the rush and it still hurts like nothing else. I don't know how true that is. I know that they hurt like crazy. That could be an urban myth or it could be true. I'll have to research that. But the point is, make sure that you know what the risks are in the area that you're traveling. Make sure you keep your eyes out for those risks, whether it's a plant or an animal or otherwise. It could be an area known for the tides coming in really quickly, or the weather suddenly turning for the worse. So just a bit of knowledge will help you a long way. Now, back to driving in cars. So I'm going to introduce to you the concept of a grab bag. If you haven't heard of this concept, it's a really fantastic idea. A grab bag, it should be a small bag somewhere within easy reach in your four-wheel drive, right behind the driver's seat, or somewhere really convenient that you can just reach and grab if you need to suddenly jump out of your vehicle. If your vehicle is on fire or it rolls or something catastrophic happens and you need to bail out of your vehicle, then you need to be able to just reach for this bag, jump out, and you've got in that bag everything that you need to stay alive for 2 to 3 days. I'm not talking a lot of things. Basically similar to what you take for hiking in your backpack. It needs to have water, but I'm talking about 2 to 5 litres of water to keep one person alive for, say, 2 or 3 days. Water, some kind of shelter. So you can get emergency shelters or emergency tents which pack up into a really, really tiny small package, and they are, sometimes they're single-use tents, but they're made out of a really, really thin plastic material, and they're often orange coloured, so very, very visible. And you can then erect a shelter and be safe from the elements. If it's cold, it'll insulate you. If it's wet, then it'll keep you dry. A space blanket will also do a good job. You can also have, with this grab bag, you can now, because you're talking about something you carry in the car and not on your back, it can be a little bit heavier, but not too heavy, because you need to be able to jump out of the car easily with it. So you can have a few extra things like a plastic sheet or a plastic bag. So you can create water using these things. It has to be clear plastic. With a plastic bag, you can wrap it around a branch and tie it off and let it sit there in the sun, and the moisture will evaporate out of the leaves, hit the inside of the plastic bag and pool down the bottom, and you will have drinking water. Same thing with the clear plastic sheet. You can dig a hole, put a little container in there, fill it full of green leaves picked off trees, then put the sheet over the top, weight it down with 4 stones in each corner, put a weight in the middle, and the same thing will happen. As the sun shines on it, the water will evaporate out of the leaves, hit the underside of the sheet, run to the middle, into the bucket, and you will have yourself some pure drinking water. Better than nothing. It could save your life. So this is the bare essentials. In your grab bag, I recommend having something to create a fire with, a flint and a lighter. They are both waterproof, and a flint will always work. A lighter is easier to use, so I recommend having both. Have, if you can fit a little, either a jet boil or a solid fuel stove, but something that you can heat water with. If you have hot water, then you can keep yourself warm at night. If you have a small freeze-dried packet of food, then you've got something to eat. Like I said, food is the least important thing, because you can survive for 3 weeks without food. You can survive for 3 days without water. So water is very, very important. You can survive for 3 minutes or less if you have a cut. So the first thing should be first aid kit, most important, then water, and then shelter, and then lastly food. So I'm going to be assembling such a grab bag over the next few months, and I'll present that to you in a future video. But what I'm interested to know is, have you thought about a grab bag? And if you have, I'd love to know what you have in yours. I'm not talking about a bug out bag. You can do a search on YouTube for bug out bags and you get a million results. A bug out bag is different to a grab bag. I'm not talking about commando survival in the bush. I'm talking about just bailing out of your car, having the bare essentials, having communications, having something in there that will keep you alive for 2 or 3 days. 2 days is probably enough. Something that you can signal other people with, whether it's a sat phone or an EPIRB, or even a mirror that you can shine off the sun and give out signals, get somebody's attention. You might have fluorescent pieces of tape in there that you can hang on a tree, or cardboard and a marker pen and some Ziploc bags that you can write a message on, tie it to a tree to attract somebody's attention and say, hey, I'm down here, or I've gone this way. Speaking about going this way, if your car dies while you're out in the bush, don't leave your vehicle. So many stories I've heard about people dying because they've left their vehicle. They've gone for a walk, they've either run out of fuel, or their car has rolled or caught fire, or something has happened, engine is seized up, and they've gone for a walk and they've perished. So if that happens to you, stay with your vehicle, stay on the track. You've got a much better chance of survival. You've got a much better chance of encountering somebody else coming along the track than you do if you go off bush. You've got a much better chance of being found if you're next to your car than by finding somebody in dense bushland. So please, please stay with your vehicle. Some of the other things that you should be always mindful of, especially if you're by yourself, is things like climbing on the roof of your car. If you have a rooftop tent, be careful about climbing the ladder. If you need to get up on the roof of your car to get firewood or to take luggage off there, be careful. You're up high, especially if you're alone. You're up high, you can fall. If you're coming out of your tent in the morning and it's been raining at night or there's dew over everything, the tent could be wet and slippery. It doesn't take a lot to slip and fall off the tent and break an ankle or sprain or do a nasty injury. Only just recently I got back from Cape York, and a friend of mine, Chris, if you're watching, g'day mate, he sprained his ankle really badly. He was standing we were at Archer Point, and there was a lighthouse, and next to the lighthouse was a small little patch of concrete that used to be a little outhouse or something, but it was just the concrete left. And he was standing on this small concrete platform. It was only about this high off the ground. He was standing looking out over the ocean, and when he was finished with that, he decided to step onto the grass next to this small concrete platform, and he thought it was solid ground. Well, it wasn't solid ground. Hidden in the long grass was a massive big ditch, and he sprained his ankle really badly. And in fact, I got a message from him only about 20 minutes ago, and this is months ago now, saying that he still has a sore leg, and he thinks he broke something on that step. When he was stepping down, his foot swelled up. He found it hard to walk for a couple of days. So he could have done some real damage, and it could have been a lot worse. And that was day one of our trip. So it's really easy to break something, to sprain something, to do something stupid. So you need to really be thoughtful and take it slow, and always think about what you're about to do, what could go wrong, and that way, hopefully, you'll stay safe. Basically, that is all that was on my mind. I'm sure there's a lot of other things I could have spoken about. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on the topic. How do you stay safe in the bush? What do you take with you when you're going bushwalking? How do you stay safe when you're going on a solo trip or with a group of people? This is a topic that is not often discussed, and so I think it's important to talk about these things, because if you've seen this video, well, maybe the next time you're out in the bush and you're about to do a solo trip or walk away from the car, you might remember this video and go, oh yeah, maybe I should take some water with me, maybe I should take that EPIRB with me, or whatever the case is. So stay safe, guys, and I shall see you all in the next video. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering about my leg here, I will be off my feet for the next 3 months or so as it heals and as I get slowly back on my feet. But I have a ton of footage. I'm working my way through editing. I've been very busy. I've been on trips, so I will keep myself busy with editing those trips and bringing you more videos. So until the next video, cheerio guys, stay safe. Thank you so very much for watching. If you enjoy the content on this channel, consider subscribing and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. If you would like to say thank you, you can buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/forexadventures. You can further support this channel by buying some merchandise at forexadventures.com.au or signing up for a monthly subscription at ko-fi.com/forexadventures. Thank you so much for your support, and I shall see you in the next video.